Okay. Hi there, folks. Welcome back to another Kapo Starky Rugby podcast. Today's guest, I've got Ben Coles from Ruck and Roll Rugby. As with all my guests, the link to his work will be in the description below. Ben also does the Welsh Rugby Roundup show with the Three Bods group with Brandon Smith, who I do regular live streams with. Welcome to my channel, Ben. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having us on. I've been watching your stuff for a while now, and it's been good to actually meet you now and actually get to have a chat with you about rugby. That's what we all love chatting about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, I've seen some of your stuff, and as I'm hoping your subscriber base starts going on the up, because you've been doing some good stuff, and especially in relation to the video you did about the Gallagher Premiership against the Pro 14. We'll get into that in a wee bit, but yeah, tell us a bit about what you do with regards to your work and you do on your channel and stuff you do with the Three Bods group and the work you do in rugby in general. You're talking to me about.
Yeah, Christ, it's been a bit of a weird one really, because obviously the majority of this has started since lockdown. Like obviously everything stopped completely. Like I'm a Cardiff Blues season ticket holder. Been watching them since I was probably about 10 or 11. So that got that came to a complete standstill. So then that was that gone, and we didn't have any sort of rugby on TV to watch as such. So you start dipping in and out of the forums and things on Twitter, and you start thinking, well, I've got my opinion on things, and it's very difficult nowadays to get your voice heard. And Twitter's a really weird place sometimes. Sometimes it's really supportive. Sometimes you just get arguments left, right, and centre. So
tell me about it.
And that's why I turned to YouTube then. Obviously a lot of hours to kill during lockdown. So I spent a lot of time watching YouTube and different people like yourself, Brandon. Lots of stuff like that. Watch a lot of Squid Rugby and things like that. So then it came down to the line of thinking, well, this is something I really want to get into, but I didn't really know how to. And an opportunity opened up. Obviously, John Mulvihill, the former Cardiff Blues head coach, he left at the start of this year. And it gave an opportunity because Three Bod posted out that they were looking for someone to talk about the departure of John Mulvihill and the re-arrival then of Dai Young. So I thought, I'll put my name forward and see what happens. Didn't think to hear anything back whatsoever, but I had a message from Brandon, and he said that wanted to do a meeting with himself and Joe, the main guy over at Three Bod. So I said, yeah, absolutely, I'm well up for that. Had a little chat, and he said, yeah, we're doing a live show on Monday night if you want to join in and things like that. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll give it a try. And I just really like the format of it. It's people talking about like what me and you are now, talking about the thing that we enjoy the most, and that's rugby. So yeah, I went on there, and it just ignited a spark. and I was like, I really enjoyed that. I came off there and I thought I really enjoyed that. So started like pondering the idea myself. Like I'm a full-time primary school teacher, so time is not the richest asset that I have at the moment. But it's something I still enjoy doing in my spare time. So I thought, well, I'll start working on things in the down low now, on the quiet, and then when an opportunity arises, I'll take it with both hands and go towards it. So yeah, a couple of months later then, I think it was the end of February, I think we'd had the first round of the Six Nations. We'd had Wales against Ireland. And Brandon messaged me again and said that he wanted me to take on a more permanent role with the Welsh Rugby Roundup show as part of Three Bod. And that was the opportunity I was talking about then. So the door really opened up for me then. And the first couple of months, like, myself, Brandon, Rhian at the time, that we were working flat out. We were trying to get ourselves guests. We were trying to talk to as many people as we could, talk about as much as we could, because we were still in lockdown then. So it was a perfect opportunity. I know it sounds dreadful, but at the end of the day, the more people you're getting out to, the people are sat on their backsides most of the day, like myself, had hours to kill. So it was one of those things you think, well, the more that we put out there, the more people are going to watch. And the more that we started to do it, the more comfortable I felt in the setting. I thought, you know what, I reckon I can give this a crack on my own. So I had a chat with Brandon. Obviously, his base is enormous. In terms of, you look at stuff across the rugby community, and he's leading the way in terms of like the smaller channels, in comparison to sort of the bigger, the good, the bad, the rugby and stuff like that. But there's one thing you've got to say about him is, for that man, time doesn't cost a penny. He'll sit with you for an hour and chat about it. if you need anything whatsoever. And he was really helpful and supportive in giving me the encouragement to go ahead and have a crack on my own. So set up Ruck and Roll Rugby then. What are we, 6 weeks in now? And yeah, it's weird because sometimes I'm sitting like I am now on a Friday night and I've got a list in front of me of, I want to try and get 3 videos made and out across the weekend. And obviously we've got some rugby on as well. But it's given me that sort of that re-motivation, you know, because lockdown did a lot of things to a lot of people. And,
yeah,
you know, we see a lot, like this week has been Mental Health Awareness Week. And
yeah,
for me, myself, it was a dark time at times, I won't lie, but I enjoy what I'm doing now. Do some fun vids. I got some cracking ideas coming up. I'm going to talk about one of them in a minute. But yeah, it's a good time, I think, to talk about rugby and to be involved in rugby. There's a lot of change going on in the game. Some of it good, some of it not so good. Obviously, the reintegration of the game now coming out of lockdowns and COVID. It'd be interesting to see how it works. But we're in a good place now, mate. And I think moving forward, we've got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, fingers crossed, especially with regards to the lockdown and that. But no, that's really good, mate. I think most folk are in a similar boat, especially over lockdown period, just trying to give us stuff to do. And again, just it's good you're making use of your passion as well. I can relate there certainly. Because I was mostly just like a case of just putting myself in front of a camera and just doing it like that. But I've sort of changed my format a bit in recent weeks, so it's but absolutely. And the stuff you're doing, I'm really impressed by some of it. Maybe with regards to the Rainbow Cup stuff, I don't keep up with personally as much because I'm sort of been in and out of that a bit. I've not really watched much of it, but I want to talk a bit about because the video you did do with regards to the Gallagher Premiership versus the Pro 14. Obviously, the differences in quality and such. And you went into a lot of detail there. I wonder if you could talk to us a bit about it. On you go.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I've always followed Gallagher Premiership to an extent. Like I grew up, like my first real rugby memory, and I know it's a really bizarre one to have, but I remember the 2002, I think it was 2002, Heineken Cup final between Toulouse and Wasps.
That was 2004, mate.
2004, that was the one. And the likes of Rob Howley, Trevor Leota, the absolute machine, Lawrence Delalio, all those sorts of players. And the Premiership was always this thing that I didn't really know a lot about. But since then, I sort of followed it a lot more. I think personally, it's a far more exciting league to watch. Like Friday night now, we've got the option of there's one Prem game on, or there's 2 Pro 14 games, or Pro 14 Rainbow Cup, we'll call it then. For me, I always gravitate towards the Premiership. I think it's a far more entertaining brand of rugby to watch. I think they've got it nailed on what they're expecting from their audience then. And their fan base is growing to reflect that. Like I looked into like sort of the nitty gritty and looking at the play styles as opposed to obviously the background stuff, because there's only so much you can talk about with that, with the degree of accuracy you want to. So I looked at the playing styles, and considering attack wise, I think the Pro 14 and the Gallagher Premiership are a lot closer than people think. There's similar amounts of tries scored in both leagues. Sides are averaging roughly about the same amount of tries most games, but the big difference comes in the defences, and it's a weird one. It's almost as if the Pro 14 place more of an emphasis on, we don't want you to break our defence. We don't want you to score a try, let alone 2, 3 or 4. But I think in the Premiership, it's more of a thing that if you're going to score 4 tries, we're going to score 6. All right, you're going to come back at us with another 2. We'll score another 2 and 1 more on top of that. And I think if you watched, and if anybody had watched the Wasps and Quins game on Sunday afternoon,
that was
literally the definition of that. Every time you thought Wasps were pulling away, Quins would come back, and Quins even nicked it at the end. So it's one of those. It's a proper entertainment sport, and I just think the Pro 14 are getting it wrong, and I don't know what it is. And I know that when teams are in a certain style of play, they find it really difficult to move away from that. But I think in recent weeks, obviously we saw Leinster, probably the best that the Pro 14 has to offer, and best that we have had to offer for a number of years now, playing against La Rochelle. And although it was a really, really tough game, La Rochelle pulled away at the end, it looked like. And Brian O'Driscoll had some very harsh things to say that the Pro 14 doesn't offer the standard of competition, but it's really hard when you look at the player base that these players are working from. I relate to you on a really personal term, with Edinburgh. That it's so hard for these guys because when international camps come around, which this season we've had 3, it's so hard for these players to try and, or these clubs to try and perform at the highest level. From a Welsh perspective, we've got 3 regions that are going to be competing at the top level of Europe next year. And every time I say that to people, I follow it up with, well, I use the term compete loosely because I don't think we're at a position where we can compete at the minute. You look at the big French clubs, salary caps there compared to where they are in Europe, in the UK, nowhere near, and they're not going to be.
Do the French clubs have a salary cap yet? Because I know that's been a big debate.
Well, from what I understand, they have, but it's one that they keep moving up and up.
I was going to say it's put to abuse so much you don't know if it exists anymore. So,
but I think and it's one of those things everybody always says when if you throw enough money at the problem, it'll go away. I don't think this is a problem that gets solved with money. I just think
Saracens learned that the hard way. So and we were talking. Funny enough, myself and Brandon, we recently did a chat with Dominic Day, who was heavily involved in Saracens during their successful period, and he spoke really openly and truthfully about where he felt things had gone wrong at Saracens, and you've got to feel for them in a way because they're not the only club doing it. And he didn't mention any clubs, but if you look at clubs across the Premiership, they're not the only club doing it. So I think that's another thing that's going to blow up in weeks and months to come. But I just think COVID has set everything so far back. I think people trying to make massive changes in the game now, they really need to be careful because you look academy-wise, academies have got less and less players coming through because outside of the professional level, there's hardly been any rugby for nearly 2 years now. So it's a hard one. It's one they've got to manage carefully. But going back to talking about the Premiership and the Pro 14, I think the Premiership are head and shoulders above the Pro 14, but I just think it's their attitudes towards the game in comparison to the Pro 14. I think it is that. You think? Sorry, Ben. Do you think maybe money's played a part in that as well?
Well, naturally, money plays a bigger part, and obviously, with the Premiership being a more attractive brand, you look at the viewing figures. Sponsorship is going to go towards the Premiership. The BT Sport are providing the coverage for the entirety of the Gallagher Premiership. It's not by chance that one of the biggest sporting providers is covering the Premiership. They know it's going to get bums on seats and they know it's going to get people watching. Whereas the Pro 14 has been stuck on Premier Sport, which are an absolute shower of rubbish. They're absolutely
don't have a big language barrier, so on you.
Oh, yeah, they're the shit then. They're absolute shower of shite. And they don't. I don't think they naturally they're a soccer or football provider, and I think that naturally negates the fact that you're not going to get rugby fans over to watch it. It's far more expensive. I know BT Sport is expensive, but for the money you pay for BT Sport, you get far more and it's far better quality. And I know that doesn't naturally link to rugby, but if you've got more people watching, you've got more money coming in. Naturally, you can grow the league that way. Whereas since I feel the Pro 14 was taken away from free to view or free to air, as we call it then, naturally the figures have gone down because I would always remember sitting down on a Friday night, you'd throw BBC Sport on and the Welsh regions would be playing on BBC Wales. You'd watch BBC Alba if you wanted to, and you can guarantee the Scottish sides would be on. Yeah. But now that's gone, and it's gone behind the paywall, which for a league like the Pro 14, which is struggling so badly at the minute for viewers, I think it was such a negative move, and I think it's one that's had a massive impact. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm personally all for trying to get as much rugby onto
terrestrial television as possible. Mainly because I don't have Sky, I don't have BT, and there's plenty of other fans, I'm sure, on the same boat who, sort of they'll, maybe not be able to afford it, or they're, sort of like they'll, for various other reasons, and just how expensive everything is. I mean, so I'm all for promoting as much rugby on terrestrial television as possible. But going back to that a bit, do you think maybe the new format of the Pro 14s played a factor? Because I personally remember it was the Pro 12. It was a lot simpler. Like, it was just 12 teams battering it out, and then it would be the playoff. I mean, I understand the playoff was a more a Premiership concept at first. I'm maybe a bit of an old-fashioned in that I prefer to see like the team that finishes top of the league winning the league, like in football. But now with the Pro 14, they've got the sort of Conference A and Conference B thing. Do you think that's maybe been a factor as to why the quality's gone down?
For a fan that watches it week in, week out, I still don't understand how it works. From my understanding is that, like, say for example, Cardiff Blues are placed in Conference A next year. My understanding is that they would play every side in Conference A home and away, and then every side from Conference B once, either home or away. Now, the fact that the Pro 14 has had that set up for 2-3 years or so now, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
That says a lot that I still can't follow, and I watch as much of it as anyone can. It's ridiculous. And I think, you look at any other league, right, other than, obviously Super Rugby was very, very different because we've seen now, South Africa trying to move away from it. Due to COVID, we had, Super Rugby Aotearoa, we had the Australian version as well. Now we're starting to see those two merge back together, and the potential to South Africa to move over and play in the Pro 14 because of time zones. I just think it confuses people, and I just don't think it's, oh yeah, well done, you're the top of Conference A. Well, what does that mean in retrospect to the season? Whereas if you say, oh, Bristol Bears are currently sat in first place in the Premiership, there's one table, and, people relate to one league sports. You go to, football, the English Premiership, every division is one league.
Yes.
Rugby, top 14, one league. Pro D2, one league. Pro 14, two conferences. I just don't understand where the concept came from and why they thought it would work. Simply, each side playing home and away once a year, especially when at the minute there's only 13 sides. That gives you 26 games a year, whereas at the minute in the Pro 14 as it stands, there's 7 teams obviously in each conference. So that's 14 games. So you play 21. So you're actually getting less rugby. But yet they say that the calendar is packed. And I just don't understand it. When you look, Premiership is what? Gallagher Premiership is however many sides it is. But they're still going now. They're still in the league format, which is why that is a far more promising concept than the Rainbow Cup, or the Pro 14 Rainbow Cup as it's been labelled. It's shocking.
Yeah, absolutely agree with all of that, really. But I mean, I think also I want to touch a little bit about the too many game time, which often comes up. I personally think a big reason for that is the playoffs thing. I mean, and again, I know like there can be debates coming into that with regards to tying it in with the Six Nations, etc. Maybe like if teams are going for the league more, knowing they'll finish top spot, then how detrimental would be to the Six Nations, because it's fair to say the Six Nations is still a bigger global brand than the leagues are. So that I think comes into the conversation as well. But I mean, maybe just because I'm a sort of traditionalist, I prefer to keep it simple. Just you're competing for the league, and the top side wins it. Bottom sides or bottom 2 sides, whatever you want to do, gets relegated, and then you go from there. Although I understand Pro 14 that would work a bit differently, considering there's no real other clubs that can come in up from that. So.
Apart from Leinster A, Leinster B, Leinster C, they've probably got enough.
Exactly. But do you think though, the fact that obviously Leinster are the dominant team in the Pro 14, and the fact they've got as you're saying, like B, D, C up to D teams probably, is that a factor as well? The fact the other clubs aren't really up to standard there.
Well, I remember a few years ago they tried the British and Irish Cup. Which was like sort of the A team competition then.
Yeah.
the Welsh regions, from my point of view, the Welsh regions were filled with academy and like sort of really young players, like some of them even going down as far as like under 18s. Whereas Leinster, you know, you look at their first team and you look at the players then are left out that are going to the reserve side, and they were playing week in, week out with a side that could compete in the league. So for the likes of the Welsh regions, they turned around and they were like, "No, you're all right. We'll stick out the youngsters, you know, for a bit of game time and a bit of match exposure." But there's never any willingness to compete. And I think naturally, if you've got any league, the natural evolution is you want to see people competing, you want to see teams getting better, and you want to see different teams up there at the top. You know, that's why, you know, we saw a few years back when the Scarlets won the league. It was such a refreshing year because it was a different team. Yeah. You know, and then, you know, the season that they won it, they did the double on Leinster. And that is when you start to see, but at the moment, because, like we said, Leinster are so strong and they've got so many resources, but I think the way the rugby works in Ireland is geared up for that natural progression. You know, you go through the schooling system, you go into your academies, and then naturally your transition, if you are good enough, is straight into the first team. So I think their system is far better. I know the Dragons, not just the Dragons Academy, but academies in Wales do work in a similar way. But I think it's all since this thing of especially from Wales, this region's perspective, I think that's proved to be the most difficult standpoint, because from the WRU working down, the only objective that the regions have is to bring young players through. And I think that's been the thing for many years, which is why we haven't really seen anyone apart from the Scarlets competing. You know, I know Brandon will throw it down my throat. He'll say, "Oh, well, the Ospreys are the best region in Wales at the moment." Yeah, but the Ospreys haven't won anything for a number of years now. And even though we would still say that the Ospreys were probably one of the best regions that Wales had to offer for a number of years consecutively, I mean, Christ, the Welsh squad was made up of 13 Ospreys at one point.
Yeah.
But they haven't won anything since they won the Magners League. So that says a lot, that it was the Magners League the last time they won anything. So I think there is a restructuring that needs to be done. I don't know if it's going to happen though. Obviously, we've had COVID and other priorities have come to the fore. But I think it just needs to be looked at again, because like you said, that element of competition outside of the top 14 sides then is next to zero.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have that, I think, problem in Scotland as well. I mean, because I think both Glasgow and Edinburgh are better sides than what they produced this past season. Like generally, just because, you know, Edinburgh especially just haven't played well at all this season. But I think I was just going to talk about the Scottish perspective. My problem is the last few years we've gone a bit too far down the project player route, and obviously, like in the last few seasons, it's been quite beneficial to our national team, and that we've, you know, got better standards of players coming playing for Scotland now than we have done in the past couple of decades. But at the same time, you still think probably we can relate a bit with Welsh rugby in terms of the development. Kind of, especially now with COVID, I kind of feel like there's a hindrance to that. And I think maybe Wales, I think Wales do have a bit more advantage here in that you have 4 teams to pick from. We still have just 2, so that's just sort of the way thing.
I think that's why you see the Scottish sides get hit so hard when it comes to international time, because like you said, whereas like from my side, the Blues, we lost 7 if you include call-up players during Six Nations time, whereas I have no idea what the number would have been for Edinburgh and Glasgow, but I imagine it'd have been in the high teens. And that just, you know, considering your squad is probably going to be a 30 to 35 man squad throughout the majority of the season, you lose well over half when you go down to internationals. You're then relying on these project players, these academy players that you can bring through, or you're relying on the signings that you make that are, and I've spoken to Brandon about this as well, the signings you make, sort of the overseas signings that you know are going to be there week in, week out, you know, the likes of Mata for Edinburgh, Matawalu when he was at Glasgow, you know, those sorts of players, you know, that even when it comes to autumn time, they're only gone for a couple of weeks and they're back. So it's difficult at the minute.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, though, I think Glasgow actually in recent years have got that balance quite well, because Glasgow still have a pretty big squad, and there are a few academy players coming through. Maybe the production line isn't as big as it could have been. I still, as I said, think there's a bit too much reliance on project players. It's where I'm personally pleased that the residency rule's now gone up to 5 years over 3, because I do want to. I mean, I'm sure I fully understand all nations would hopefully feel the same here. They'd all want more of their own boys to come through the academy and then go on to be at the international standard, instead of just relying on players coming from South Africa, New Zealand, or Australia, and filling in those, getting up to a higher standard. But I think a lot of that also comes down to the fact that down in the Southern Hemisphere, with regards to professionalism, they were there a lot earlier than we were north of the equator. So that's all factors to take into consideration there. But again, with the 5-year residency rule, I'm hoping that will be a positive impact in the long run. However, with obviously COVID right now, academies and schools and grassroots rugby is still on hold, mostly. So, sort of how long is it going to be before they're up to speed to be ready to, go forward, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like we were talking, like outside of the professional game, everything else has stopped. Even at, like, from a Welsh perspective, the Welsh Premiership, clubs haven't played, since the season was frozen back last year. They haven't played a game. So it's that thing now of, like what you mentioned there, it's the getting back up to speed and trying to fill that gap of rugby that they've missed. Because, you think of these regional sides, these club sides, these provincial sides, even though you talk about the differences in quality and the differences in standards between them all, they all are going to have the same problem, is that there is that year missing where players have only had the opportunity to train in clusters. They've had a chance to work in the gym and work from home, to keep themselves physically fit. But then they've got to get it back up to match fit level, and they've got to get back up to their comfortable playing level, which means that the players going through to those top sides then, the likes of Glasgow, Edinburgh, Ospreys, Leinster, there is still going to be that big gap in time where, and don't get me wrong, there are a large amount of professionals that will still make that jump without any problem whatsoever. But is it as many as we would have seen if COVID wasn't here?
Yeah.
Probably not. So it is a concern, but obviously time will only tell, as you say, and fingers crossed that we get back to that level pretty soon. But yeah, for a player that's not playing under a contract, then let's say at the minute, it's a worrying time.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think the other thing, which is another worry from a rugby perspective, is that, with pretty much over a year out now, like how many of them are still going to be interested in the game and like still looking to pursue a career at the top. And, it's just all kind of, I mean, I think we're still going to need like another year, maybe 2 years before we actually fully see the effects of that and what it's going to be. And obviously we're not fully out of the woods yet when it comes to COVID. So we don't know, how much of an effect it's going to be yet, but it's just, from that perspective, it could be, it's going to be a global problem, I think.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. Completely agree.
Aye. But we'll get on to the Rainbow Cup a bit now. You've been obviously keeping more up with that than I have. How's it been going? And what do you think of it?
From my perspective, I've only watched the Welsh games. And like similarly to yourself, I saw the first few results from the weekend. And when I saw that Benetton had beaten Glasgow, I thought, oh, that just sums up everything that's wrong with this Rainbow Cup. Benetton haven't won a game all year in the league, and it comes to Rainbow Cup time and they beat Glasgow in their first game. I just thought, oh mate, this is going to be an absolute farce. But the thing I do like about it is we talk about these players that haven't had that opportunity to play due to international breaks and what have you, and now you're starting to see teams trying new things out, experimenting with different players, bringing people that have been on the brink then and in the academy systems, they're given a chance to play. I've done watch-alongs now for all 4 of the games that have been so far, from the Welsh perspectives, and it's been a mix of Welsh internationals that haven't really had much exposure during Six Nations time. So for the Blues, we welcomed Jared Evans back to the lineup last week. Josh Adams played. Hallam Amos was back in the squad and playing. You look at the Ospreys, Alan Wynne-Jones played, Justin Tipperick, Ken Owens played. So it's been, I almost, and I keep using this analogy, it's been the perfect pre-season if you know what I mean. Because like,
yeah, I get where you're coming from. Yeah,
it's just giving these players chance to have a run out and chance to play rugby, and especially when I watched the Dragon Scarlets game, literally that's what it looked like. It almost looked like an exhibition match to an extent. You wouldn't ever think that there was something on it. You know, they're playing for a trophy, but it's a weird concept. You know, obviously the fact that they're still going ahead with it, even though currently we can't get a South African side involved in the Northern Hemisphere yet. But then today it was announced that there is going to be a North versus South final.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Ben. What do you think of that? The fact that there's only 4 South Africans, they're competing on their side, and there's like 10 competing up here. I mean, what do you think of the North versus South final?
Because it is a one-off game, I think, you know, crack on with it. You know, and again, I'll use this term again, it's been a shit show from start to finish. We're only 2 rounds in, but already, you're seeing how sides are approaching it. Like the Blues haven't had the same starting 15 for I've looked at the side for the game on Saturday against the Scarlets, and we haven't selected the same side once. Ben Thomas, a player that, myself and Brandon have talked about a bit. I'm a big fan of his. I've watched him play, really like him. In the game against the Ospreys, the first game up, he played fullback. Sunday against the Dragons, he played 10. And now he's starting on Saturday at 13. So 3 games, 3 different positions.
Yeah.
So it is like a perfect experimental time, and especially, obviously, the Scarlets now. Glenn Delaney walked away after the win against the Ospreys last week, which has baffled me. Obviously, Dai Young is still, settling back in down at the Blues, and Toby Booth with the Ospreys. He's just been given that opportunity now to see what he's been working on for all these past months start to come to fruition a bit. The Ospreys are playing some really nice stuff at the minute. But for me, the one side that have remained constant in all of it is the Dragons. I just really like the way they're looking at the minute. Yes, the Blues got a win against them last week, but they're playing some really nice rugby at the minute. They've got a nice mix of youth and experience. I mean, against the Blues last week, Jamie Roberts started at inside centre, a man with 80 plus caps for his country, alongside an Aaron Owen who's just broken into the Dragon side. And that's exactly what this cup offers. The chance to see new players, but in a competitive environment. Whereas, in the Pro 14, like you said, if you're a side that's competing for the title at the end of it, you may not use that opportunity as often to bleed these youngsters and bring these youngsters through. So it's been good from that perspective, and the rugby's been okay. It's the rules, mate. The rules are just an absolute joke. I was watching the highlights of the Blues game back, and I didn't realise that at one point the Blues scored with a couple of minutes to go, and then Josh Turnbull used this captain's challenge, even though the try had been scored, even though they were in the lead, and it was just almost used as if to say, right, we want this player yellow carded because he's done something he shouldn't have. And I just think it's going to go down the way of football if we're not careful. There's some things that we can take an example of from football, but these new rulings they've brought in to try and make it, speed the game up, they've said that it's going to do. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts on the rulings that they brought in were, but for me, not a big fan.
Yeah, the captain's challenge one, I think, should stick to just one, maximum. And if they get it wrong, then you move on and no more complaints. Yeah. But I do understand the fears that it's going down towards football with that route, which, but again, I think obviously referees are human, they'll make mistakes, and I'm perfectly happy with, sort of the players thinking, okay, if something's gone wrong here, them going to the referee, but if they are wrong, then it should be just a case of you accept you're wrong, that's it, you go back and you get on with the game, and that's final. I haven't, obviously, because I haven't seen enough of it. I'm still not sure about the on the goal line dropouts, because I think that's a very rugby league rule. And the red card one, as I'm firmly against that one, because I think a red card, if you commit such a serious offence, then that should be your team down to 14 men, because I think it takes away from it a bit. Even though that player is still sent off, you can just bring someone back on after 20 minutes. I'd be in favour of more a kind of orange card kind of format, if you know what I mean, where something that's maybe sort of in the middle of a red. These days getting more deemed as a red card, but maybe something that's in the middle, like for example, an air collision where someone's gone for the ball and they've just accidentally taken momentum into the player who's in the air, and then the player by accident, like lands on their head or whatever. Obviously, you don't wish that to happen, and it's not something that should be condoned at all. But you still think like the player actually committing hasn't meant that to happen. So something like an orange card for that might be a bit better way to go. But yeah.
I'll say that you mentioned the fact that you didn't like two of them. It both happened in the Dragons and Blues game. So Owen Lane dropped a shoulder into Bertrand, the Dragon scrum half, dropped the shoulder into him. He didn't have the ball. Arms were down. It was definitely a red card. And that happened on the 45th minute. During the time that he was off. I couldn't hear it because I was doing a watch along, so I had the TV muted. But then I saw a player warming up, and I was like, what's happening here? And then somebody put down in the chat and said, oh, the red-carded player is going to be replaced on the 65th minute after 20 minutes. And I thought, well, hang on now, because that was a big momentum change for the Dragons. They had 20 minutes where they were playing with 14 men. They even had an extra 10 minutes when they were down to 13 men. But like you said, the momentum change it gives sides then when all of a sudden that player that was red-carded, a replacement is allowed to be brought on, so it's back up to a full complement. And I think it did, because the Blues managed to pinch a win at the end, and due to the fact that they were back up to a full complement, I think, and like watching how the game unfolded, was how they managed to get back on top of that game. But the goal line dropout, it happened in the Scarlet Ospreys game Saturday night, and Justin Tipuric was screaming at the referee, effectively saying, well, there was an advantage in the build-up, surely. And he said, no advantage. Ball held up over the line. He said, well, go to the TMO and check it then. He said, I can see the ball has been held up. It's a goal line dropout. And I think with a side that's got so much momentum building up to the line, and if they get held up, to then have that ball taken away from them, I know they're still receiving the ball from the dropout, but it negates the fact you had pressure on their 5 meter line, which you would have seen from again. I don't understand why they think that. And I get the speed up of the game, because you don't want to see, like we saw, Wales, France a number of years back. We went into 100 minutes of the game, and France scrummaging us to death on our 5 meter line.
I don't know. I just thought that was funny because it went on so long. So I understand from a Welsh point of view, you'd be absolutely going nuts at that, but
I turned it off. I remember sitting there at the time. I got to 86 minutes. And I thought, you know what? Wayne Barnes is going to do everything in his power to give the win to France here. So I just turned the TV off, walked off. And then when they said later on that France had won in the 100th minute, I was like, I'm not surprised in the slightest. Not surprised at all. That was just how that game was going to go.
Barnes, he did nothing wrong, though. So
he did nothing wrong. But you could just see it. It was just going to happen.
Yeah. No, but that stuff like that. I mean, I have a little bit of skepticism with regards to teams having a scrum after they've been held up over the line. I mean, I personally prefer if it goes to like a tap, for example, like a tap on the 5 meters. I think would be a bit fairer there. That's just my opinion. But no, I mean the goal line dropout. I just think it's something going towards rugby league, as I said, and I'm not really a big fan of it. I mean, there's a lot of the game already going that way, especially with the blitz defenses and the kicking games that are going more in the rugby league kind of direction. Pardon me, and have been for the last decade or so. So I don't want us to become like rugby union, to become like a sport where it's rugby league only with 15 players, and that's
just you can brand it whatever you want. I think within the next 10 years, scrummaging is going to change massively and go towards what rugby league is, because you look at how they restart the game, and they talk about the scrummage. It's not a scrummage. It is just a means to restart the game. And I think sometimes we get so bogged down, and I know so many games have won when teams get parity at scrum time, but I think you look at how many minutes are lost per game. Reset scrums. Some games it works out that like you lose almost a third, or not a third, sorry, like a fifth of the game is gone just on scrummaging. And especially in the games where you've got two big scrummaging sides, they will try and, our scrum's better than yours, and they'll be pushing back and forth. And you end up, that's what the game becomes revolved around. And I think that's going to change within the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's one thing I would be slightly in favour of, is the scrums changing, because they're just, for the last 20 years or so, they've just been an absolute mess. I mean, understand health and safety, they're trying to go that way. I mean, I would be in favour of it, is just because it initially, and by law, it is still deemed as the safest way to restart the game. So
yeah,
but yeah, it's just become, you know, a bit of a joke there, and especially how, like, you know, sort of there's so much focus on what happens before the hit rather than, you know, sort of it's meant to be what happens after the front rows come together that matters, because the front rows coming together, basically the principle is to hold the scrum up until the ball goes in, then the hooker hooks it back. But because there's so much focus on power these days, it's about, you know, them just getting at each other straight away and just, like, you know, more focused on the pushing, and the hooking almost doesn't exist anymore. And you still see scrum halves more or less chuck the ball straight into the second row's feet and not get pinged at all for it. So it's
one of those that, like, from my time playing, I played a lot. Like, I sort of transitioned from second row to front row when I was about 16, and you go through, especially when you get to senior rugby, the way that you're coached in training is like, and this was back in the time where it was crouch, touch, pause, engage. When you had the touch, you'd get sort of some games where you would almost use the touch and try and use it as a touch, grab hold of the shirt and almost like slingshot your way into the scrum. Because like you said, that initial hit is where the scrum is going wrong at the minute. And they're just trying to provide as much stability as they can. You know, they've shortened the gap. It's crouch, whatever it is now. I forgot what it, and that, like, you talk about, you know, the bind, the bind is too low, the bind is on the arm, and it just bit by bit, there's just like small things like that are, and you know, you look at the props when they stand up, like footballers that have just had a free kick given against them, and they're looking at the ref with a perplexed look on their face, going, you know, what are we talking about, ref? It's not me. And
the problem on the whole, sorry Ben, problem on the whole is that referees are looking at it like that too. They're focusing, because there's so much focus on who's got the advantage. It's not, you know, who's actually binding legally as much, because, you know, you can have the more powerful pat, but if you're not going forward, but if you're, you know, not binding on the right bit of the shirt, or, you know, sort of you're maybe pulling your arm in and just dragging them in, you could still have the advantage and the referee could still favor you. So it's just, little things like that, really.
Yeah, it is difficult, and I think partly the reason is, and I always laugh at it when you hear it said in commentary, is when the referees are talking to all six front rowers, talking about, you know, when we get a hit, I want the hit maintained until the ball comes in, and then you can do whatever you want. And then you almost look at the commentators when they're saying, how many scrums has that referee been in? How many scrums do you reckon he knows? You know, when you've got, you know, you've got over 100 kilos pushing behind you, you know, I'll just keep it steady here for you, ref, until you are happy that the scrum half can get the ball in. You know, never mind my neck, shoulders, whatever it is, you know. It just needs to be a lot quicker. And I know that because it's such a fundamental part of gaining dominance in a game, it's not going to go away to an extent. You know, you'd see the end of player, the sort of the big, bulky prop, then you'd go more towards, like, you know, like you go towards a lighter forward, then a lighter, like a Rory Sutherland. Then for me, he sort of fits the perfect modern prop mold. If you get me, he, you know, you look at him, and if you weren't a rugby player, you'd say, my God, he's in good shape, but he plays in the front row. You know, whereas back a few years ago, you'd have a lot bigger front rows, and the only reason they were in there is to keep that scrum solid. Yeah,
Rory Sutherland's a pretty good scrummager, though. You have to say.
Oh yeah, he's a machine, and that's the thing, though, because you get that deceptive side of things. Then, don't you? It doesn't matter if you're like a massive Kyle Sinclair, you know, going in and getting that dominance at scrum. You can be short, squat, well built, and still get that dominance. It's all about technique when it comes to scrum time.
Yeah, absolutely.
The dark arts, as we call it, skullduggery.
No, absolutely. But again, I think, as I was saying, it needs to go back more into, like, you know, sort of focusing on what happens after the front rows come together, and not what happens before. But again, a lot of it has come down to health and safety and such. And because I did referee myself before the pandemic. I'm hoping to get back into it when restrictions are eased more. And we were taught, like, in our courses, like, the main priority is safety at all times. So you know, and basically anything that's this is quite rightly, anything that's unsafe, stop the game straight away. But, you know, with the scrums, like, the main focus is making sure they stay there. But there's just, because it comes to safety, as I said, there's just too much focus on them, you know, front rows trying to, the front rows themselves, they're just trying to get one over each other before the ball's even gone in.
Yeah.
I went off a bit of a tangent there, but I was trying to do.
It's all good, mate.
Aye, but yeah. Speaking of the big forwards, we're going to get into the Lions, going to South Africa. Coming up against probably the biggest, meanest pack of forwards in the world. What are your thoughts on the 37-man squad that Gatland's decided to take?
It's perfectly summarised. I don't know if you've seen it in Squidge Rugby's video.
Yeah,
he said, we're watching the build-up. It's a Lions tour announcement. You're excited about the players that are going to be announced. They call Josh Adams out first of all, going through the players alphabetically, and you go, "Yep, here we go. We're on to something." Bundiaki, huh?
Yeah.
And it was just perfectly summarised how I think every rugby fan up and down the country, I know you did a video with Nathan the other day. Everybody must have sat and looked at the telly and gone, "What?" I mean, don't get me wrong, fantastic player and really good at what he does. But I think the more I've sat and thought about it, the inclusion of him is not so much understood now, but it's clearer why Gatland has done it. And I think that the squad he's picked is more than capable of doing the job down in South Africa. I still think, as much as you don't account your chickens before they've hatched, I think the Lions will still go in as favourites.
Lions are favourites.
I would go in Lions as favourites simply because the amount of rugby that their team will have had coming back into this, right? You look at it this weekend, the weekend just gone, was the first time that Dwayne Vermeulen got any rugby under his belt. Eben Etzebeth came off the bench for a few minutes. Snyman is back in training at the minute, but he's not fit yet. Lou Diaga, another one who's back in training, but not match fit yet.
Peter Detroit, he's playing again. And
yeah, he's doing
really well. He's been back a couple of games. He's doing really well. So
yeah, and I think he was World Player of the Year the year they won the World Cup, and rightly so. But I don't know. I'm not going down the line of the South Africans are going to be undercooked, because I think that's, if you go into it thinking that mindset, I think you've absolutely had it. Mm-hmm. I just think that the squad Gatland has picked, it allows him to play a multitude of ways. And I think the first test will be key. Obviously, we've got only a few warm-up games in the build-up, but I think roughly in his head, he'll have a rough idea of who he thinks is going to start in that first test. And if they can work out how the South Africans are going to play in that first test, and Gatland gets it on the money, then I don't think we'll see many changes in the tests after that. I think South Africa will come with a certain game plan, and obviously the only thing that Gatland and his coaches will have had to study would have been the 2019 World Cup, because it's the last time South Africa played competitively. Mm-hmm. So, they've got their warm-up game, I believe, against the USA prior to the
two against Georgia.
Georgia as well, is it? I didn't see that. I saw that they were playing the US, or they may have been playing the US.
I think it's just two tests against Georgia they've got now.
Right, okay.
I stand to be corrected, but that's just last time I checked. So
no, I'll be honest, I haven't had a look into it that much from the South African perspective. I just got this feeling that this group of players have got a very good opportunity here. There's some players really in form. And if Gatland allows them to play, they could cause South Africa some real problems.
Yeah. To be honest with Bundiaki, though, I was one of the few that wasn't surprised, because I know Gatland loves his bash up 12. We know that over the years. Obviously, you with Wales will know that with Jamie Roberts. Of course, with in Ben Teo going in 2017. So, I did think initially it would be if they could get Manu Tuolangi back fit enough, but the injury he's had, and I don't think it would have been fair to pick him considering he's not played for ages. And the injury he's had, it's not a case of, he just recovers and gets himself back into peak condition for the Lions, and in terms of ability and performance as well. So no, I'm not surprised that he's taken someone like a Bundiaki with him, because I know what he would like. Probably one of the biggest surprises for me, as from a back's perspective anyway, was Jonathan Davies. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd be honest, I probably called this in in the French game, Wales against France. He hasn't looked himself for a long time now, and I think he did have a decent game. I think it's important to say he had a very decent game against the Ospreys on Saturday night, and he looked a lot better, we'll say then, especially in the conditions they were playing, and it was absolutely hammering down. I just think time was against him. I think he needed more time to get himself back up to that competitive level. And obviously the selection has just come probably for him, probably about 3 or 4 weeks too early. I think if you'd have given him that time and, a couple more games of the Scarlets under his belt to get himself back up to that competitive match level, and he'd have been in there. The only thing is, though, and similarly to yourself, I don't think he fits the mould of what Gatland wants. I don't think that's the way Gatland's going to play this Lions tour. You look especially at the back row as he's selected. He's gone with Laws, he's gone with Byrne, he's gone with Simmons, who I had in. He was probably one of the 3rd or 4th names in my Lions squad. He was really high up for me. I think, you cannot ignore that talent.
Eddie can.
Yeah, if you're Eddie Jones, you can ignore it for as long as you want. But at the end of the day, class is permanent, and that boy has got it in bucket loads. And he is really, especially on the fast pitches in South Africa, I think he's really going to hit the ground running. And I think he is my outside chance. I've been having a look. There's a video coming out on my channel tomorrow where I've picked my Lions Test 15. And every other position has been solid since day one. I've changed my back row about 12 times because I just don't, at this moment in time, I think Gatland is going to want to play a game where he guesses loose forwards out into the wide channels.
Yeah.
And I think so in the Six Nations, Byrne has got the capability of playing out in that wide channel. He's got a lovely pair of hands on him, good turn of pace. Faletau, for obvious reasons, he's probably the one person that everybody's had in their test team since way before the squad was announced. I just get a sneaking suspicion that Simmons could sneak in there. I think if he has a good couple of games in the build-up to that first test, I think he could go in there. And if you look at the way Gatland has selected Lions teams over the last few years, he's not afraid to make a bold decision in the first test. You go back to 2017, he dropped Sam Warburton, who was tour captain in that first game, and made Peter O'Mahony captain. You look at the tour before when they went to Australia, drops Brian O'Driscoll in the 3rd test, I understand that. But, the likes, 2009 tour when we went to South Africa, starting Tom Croft in the first test. If he sees that this player can do something that's going to cause him problems, I don't think it makes a difference if he's got 10 caps, 100 caps, or 4 caps. If he's doing well in that condition and in that environment, I think he'll start. It's just that thing of, I think Gatland is going to very much have to go in with the approach that it doesn't matter what number shirt you've got on your back. All the players are going to have to interchange comfortably. And I think that's why the squad was named in this fashion that it was, because I think versatility was the main thing that won a lot of people. Mainly for me, Elliot Daly and Courtney Laws.
Yeah, just talking that, do you think Simmons, because I still think it's Faletau is going to be likely to test it. I mean, as you're saying, if Simmons does have a good tour in the pre-warm-ups, he's got every chance of making it. I personally would have him on the bench with Faletau just ahead of him, but you think he could fit into the rest of that back row if Faletau and Simmons are the same back row?
I think Faletau starts regardless. However, if you look at Faletau's season at Bath have played him a lot at 6.
Yeah.
And a few of those games where he's played at 6, Gatland has been there watching. And like we said, it doesn't matter whether he's got 6 or 8 on his back. Faletau gets everywhere. He's at every breakdown. And especially, and I was watching back a few weeks ago, it was on Sky, the Wales Summer Tour test in New Zealand a few years back. And in both of those games, Wales scored tries early on, one with Faletau going over and one with Alan Wyn-Jones going over, right out on the far left-hand touchline. We look at the Lions test where the Lions got back into it in that second test. Faletau scores a try because he's hanging out on the wing.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see that again. I think the loose forwards will get out into those 15-metre channels to give the Lions attack that breadth that it needs to cause South Africa problems. And you know, it's going to be I can't wait. I'm so excited to see that first test. You know, the warm-up games I think is a bit different this time around, because usually, you know, we've got the game against Japan, but then other than that, we've got 5 games, which is the 4 South African provinces and the South African A team.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see that sort of. You usually see on Lions tours there's that natural divide when you get to around the 2 or 3 week mark, where your midweek squad are the ones that are getting nowhere near the test, and then your Saturday squad are the team that you pick because they're going to be in that test. So I think very early on we'll see where Gatland's going with it. Reading a very interesting stat that the amount of players that play in the very first game on tour to the amount of players that make it to the first test averages out at about 9.
Okay.
So 9 of those players that play in the very first game of the tour go on to make the test side. And I just found it really strange. I love looking at like little nuggety stats like that. Like you were saying about Manu Tuilagi. Manu 2 game Alangi, I call him, because we see him for more than 2 games at the time. But the best one, and I think it's around the 10 selection, because I think that's the one that's been sort of debated the most.
Yeah.
Do you know the last time Jonathan Sexton played 3 games back to back?
It was 2018, wasn't it?
2018.
You could, I mean, I was going to say you could make the argument for this recent Six Nations, but also the fact there was a week gap between the Italy and the Scotland game, you know, could come into conversation there.
3 years ago, I just thought that was I was listening to what did I hear it on? The Flats and Shanks podcast.
Aye.
And Tom Shanklin came out and he just said, Johnny Sexton hasn't played 3 games consecutively since 2018. I was like, wow, that's a crazy stat. But yeah, there's so many contentious ones. But I think the ultimate thing you've got to say is that there's 37 guys going to South Africa to do a job. And I think we'll all get behind them, regardless of whether you're Scottish, Irish, or Welsh.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not to forget them.
Sorry?
Not to forget England. Don't want to
upset of course. England. They had the worst in the Six Nations, yet they've still got the most representation on the party. So yeah. But no, Courtney. I was going to say Courtney Laws is an interesting one, because obviously still coming back to fitness right now, and obviously injured in the Six Nations. Not the same injury as Manu Tuilagi. I think he's very capable of getting himself back up and getting himself into good condition in time for the Test series. Whether he'll play in the tests or not, I'm still not sure. But no, you don't think so? Because you think Gallagher might not think he's got the ability with his tackling, his ability with his clearing out, because he can hit. I mean, as hard as anyone in the game. Courtney Laws.
Yeah, I think if Gatland goes into it with the mindset that he wants to fight fire with fire, then there's every possibility that Courtney Laws makes it into that match day 15. But if you look at how South Africa, especially in the World Cup, they lined it up, where they had Etzebeth and De Jager, let's say for an example, starting, and then you got Snyman coming off the bench as well, alongside the other Mossart. Yeah. Had 4 second rows, 4 enormous second rows, 2 starting, 2 coming off the bench. I don't think if you want to play this game, this test series tactically, I think you've got to try and surprise them. I think you've got to throw that element of surprising. Absolutely. And like that's why for me, Ty Burns starts at 6. I think he offers that versatility. He's a fantastic line-up forward. He's a fantastic loose forward. He gets an incredible amount of tackle work. Courtney Laws, it's interesting. He went on the 2017 tour, and at that time, I was really excited to see him go. But I just don't think he lived up to the expectation on that tour. You never know. I could be proved wrong. I've been proved wrong many times this season of players that have been selected, and I didn't really understand why. And then they go ahead and completely shock me. But yeah, Courtney Laws was an interesting one. He hasn't played much rugby since February. I know he's coming back, and obviously Gatland has backed the fact that he knows how quickly he can recover and how quick his transition is from recovering from injury to being back up to test ready. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be Lions test ready? I'm not sure, but I think he's given him every possible opportunity to do it. And perhaps his selection in the squad gave him that, that motivation and that kick up the backside almost to think, well, you know, he thinks I'm good enough, so I've got to start to prove that I am now.
Yeah, absolutely. And as he gets back to his peak, we all know what he's capable of. But what do you think of, like, sort of possibilities of number 7 shirt? Who would you have as your number 7?
This is the one that I'm having so many things about, because for me, looking at, you're talking about that thing of people in the wide channels and ball players out in the wider channels. I think you've got to say Tipperick is nailed on for that 7 jersey. He's such a good ball player. He's got a great pair of hands, and especially if that's the way Gatland wants to play, then he's going to be in. And I don't think it makes a difference whatever way you think about it. If Gatland wants to play that way, I know personally I wouldn't. I think he is going to, but I wouldn't want to go for him.
Yeah,
I'm going to go. I've worn the jersey tonight. I'd love to see Hamish Watson in there. I'd love to see Hamish Watson in there, because he's such a destructive presence. People keep saying, is he big enough to take on the box? That's absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
He's an absolute animal. And I think it doesn't matter whether you're putting him up against Snyman, who's 72 foot tall, or whether you're putting him up against, Rassie Erasmus himself. He's just an absolute tank of a bloke. And I think you can't underestimate how good he'll be. I think he is going to be involved in the test side of some way, shape or form, whether he comes off the bench or whether he starts.
Yeah. I hope so.
I do think Tipperick, though.
All right. Okay. I was just about to say we can still be friends if you're putting Bishop up. Not that I've got anything against Justin Tipperick particularly, because I think he's a very good rugby player. But I think just the way Mish has been playing lately, just his ability over the ball, his ability with ball in hand. I mean, folk just so underestimate his ball carrying. He gets over the gain line at least 7 or 8 times out of 10 when he has the ball in his hands. And also, he's more than capable of taking on the big boys. As he showed against France, there was one moment he sort of ducked under Uni Antonio, who's probably the biggest prop out there, and just showed him up. And the thing is, also because his lower center of gravity running and his footwork, he can be more awkward for the bigger players, the taller players. I think that we might, if he does play in the test, that is, we might see a few high shots from one of the South African second rows, because just of how awkward he can be and just going around them. And I just think he's brilliant. Like, his all-round game, he works as hard as anyone as well. He is capable of running the wide channels. He's not as good a footballer as Tipperick is, though. But I may be a little bit biased coming my way, but I just think he's brilliant. I think him and Curry as the two flankers would be a great balance. And this would be controversial. I'd put Byrne in the second row alongside Alan Wynne and have Maro Itoje on the bench. I understand with regards to the line out, that might weaken it a bit, because Maro is probably the best defensive line out forward going. But that's just what I think. So
I think personally, and you're talking about the bias, I think Scotland were done out, mate. I think that they were two. Well, there was one definite that I thought would have been in there, but there was another one that I thought he would have suited this Lions tour down to the ground. I think Johnny Gray is extremely unlucky not to be going on this Lions tour. Johnny Hill is in, which leads you to believe that he's going for the bigger line out forward. But Johnny Gray is more than capable of competing in that line out. Mate, I'm a massive lover of Grant Gilchrist. Massive lover of Grant Gilchrist. I think you look at how he played in that French game. He's an absolute monster. He's an absolute monster. Controversially, I had George Turner in my extra hooking spot. Really? So I got the first two right. I got Cowan Dickey and I got Ken Owens right. I went for George Turner as my other option.
Well, okay.
I don't think Jamie George is right for this tour whatsoever. I think that the high tempo, the high speed, is not a game for him. And as much as they are going to play an abrasive game, I think a hooker like George Turner is a perfect opportunity, especially bringing him off the bench. Like you said, especially in those latter stages of the game when players are tiring, he's a perfect player. He's not the tallest, and the way he carries naturally leads towards players putting a high shot on him here or there. I'd have loved to have seen Turner involved. So this time around, I was looking at the squad balance, and obviously, I think for Wales, 10 players was probably about the best we could have hoped for. 11 English players baffled me. I looked at that when they showed the stat at the end. Mako Vunipola, don't understand how he's going again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was scratching my head over him going on the 2017 tour, but I nearly pulled my hair out when I saw him named for this tour.
He did okay in the 2017 one, but the recent Six Nations with Mako is when he played, he looks absolutely knackered. I mean, against France, like he came off after 50 minutes, and I mean, even in the first half against Ireland, I just thought you look so like I thought with Billy. Everyone was talking about with Billy after the first two games, where he just looks so unfit. I mean, Eddie even spotted it in the Ireland game and shafted him off at half time against Ireland, as I said, against Ireland, pardon me. And you think like it's a credit in the bank thing. Same with Jamie George and Elliot Daly. Maybe a bit different with Elliot Daly in regards to he can be versatile, and of course he can cover the whole 3/4 line and fullback. But you do just think like it's not a form thing. It's just a case of reputation. And I would have picked Ellis Genge above Mako after how he played in that Challenge Cup semi-final.
I put my squad together. I typed it out. And for me, my loose heads, I had Wyn Jones, Rory Sutherland, and Genge. And then tight heads, I had Furlong, Sinclair, and Xander Ferguson.
Okay.
I think Sinclair's bitterly unlucky to miss out, because you talk about form in the bank. Sinclair went on that 2017 tour, and in some, especially in his game against the Chiefs, where he makes like a 30-meter break down the middle of the field.
Yeah,
I think you look at the way he's playing for Bristol as well, and you talk about this game that Gatland wants to play, where he's going to try and exploit the wide channels with those loose forwards. You usually look then to your second rows as being that link towards, the forwards to the backs, because your back rowers in attack can extensively become extra attackers. Sinclair is a perfect player to fit that mold. His handling abilities for a prop are ridiculous. He's got a great pass with both hands. And obviously the video was circulated all around after his response last weekend after the game. And I think he is bitterly unlucky not to be going. I think if there is an injury and he doesn't get called up, then there's something wrong, because I would have had him in there over Andrew Porter. But I think due to the fact Porter can play both sides, I think that's something that's played into the mindset. There's not really many international props at the minute that are comfortable playing both sides. Yeah,
I'm not sure about that, to be honest, Ben, because he's picked 3 loose heads already and picked 3 tight heads. So, I mean, I think Andrew Porter, mainly because Robin McBride works with him at Leinster, I thought he might have an advantage over a couple others. I did actually honestly think that Kyle Sinclair would go above Xander Ferguson, but as we know from past Lions tours, Gatland does seem to like to go off the last game of the Six Nations, and that last game, England against Ireland, Sinclair didn't have a good game that day, and he spent a lot of time just yapping to the referee and getting himself into trouble there. And you just Gatland's probably looking at thinking, I'm not sure about that. But also he's picked Xander Ferguson, who has his moments. I think not that I think Xander's a bad player at all. I think he's a very good rugby player, but he does have his moments where if he gives 1 or 2 penalties away, he doesn't just like sort of wipe it off and say, okay, it doesn't matter, let's move on. He sometimes just has a bit of a thing where he seems to give away more penalties, and then he gets, and obviously with the red card he got against Wales, which by letter of the law was a red card, but at the same time, I can understand arguments that some may say he was a little bit unlucky. But when it comes to discipline, yet you're looking at both of them, you think, But as I say, Gatland, he has a habit of going off by the last game of the Six Nations. He's done that in the previous 2 tours as well.
Do you think the fact that Tandy and Gregor Townsend played a part in his selection? Do you think that they would have said? Do you think they would have said, "Look, Xander, when he's on the money, he's a top player," and I think he's got a great asset that he's got in that he's a good scrummager, and I do believe he is a good scrummager.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the case of a few of the picks. For example, if it was if neither Tandy nor Townsend were on the coaching team, and sort of it was no Scots, I don't think Finn would have been considered, because he's not really Gatland's type of player. But I think also, as I've been saying in previous podcasts, the more conservative side to Finn's game with regards to his tactical kicking and his ability to, sort of read the game tactically a lot better has improved a heck of a lot. Especially against France, he was excellent there. I understand he got a red card in that, and that took the gloss off what was a very good performance. But still, I think, but also I think that unpredictability factor he has is something that I think you need in South Africa, as we were talking about, with a bit of variety. I expect Bigger to be the starting 10, but I think having Finn coming off the bench and keeping the South Africans on their toes in the last 20 minutes, especially if it's a tight game, could make a serious impact, I think.
Yeah, I really like the way Finn Russell plays. And I think, it's interesting you say about the fact that if Tandy and Townsend weren't involved, that he wouldn't be picked. He wasn't being picked for Scotland if we go back 18 months ago.
That was all to do with little things they made up for that. So,
oh no, I know that, but it's just one of those things. You just think, it was one of those things they were happy to do without him. But I think he absolutely had to go on this Lions tour. Probably didn't shower himself in the amount of glory he would have wanted from this Six Nations. I think a couple of games he got pulled off way too early, in my opinion, and like you said, especially in the last 20 minutes of games, he comes into his own because he's got that air of unpredictability. He can, if he's got the ball in hand and he's ready to kick, he could be turning you in defence and trying to push you back to the corner. Mm-hmm. But likewise, he could have spotted a gap where your fullback is too far across to the left-hand side and he's just put in a worldie of a crossfield kick. And, your wingers, he might not score off it, but your winger is making good meters at the touchline. So I think he has to be involved, and I think he will. I think he will be the reserve. He'll be on the bench in the tests, like you say. He'll come on, and I think he will have a big part to play. Likewise with Bigger, I think Bigger's game has improved so much in the last year, mainly down to the fact he's playing in the Premiership, as he's pointed out himself. He's had to change his game style up, and I think it's benefited both Northampton Saints and it's benefited Wales as well. He's got the confidence to unlock that wider attack option now, whereas before we saw he was struggling a bit in that respect. So rightly so, I think you've got it bang on. I think Bigger starts for me and Finn Russell comes off the bench.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. The thing is, I thought Bigger might be the unlucky one of the four contenders who'd miss out. I did think I wouldn't have picked Farrell, but I did think he would go just based on the fact he can play 10 and 12. But I mean, the fact that Dan Bigger the last few weeks, after I made that prediction, he might be an unlucky one. He just played so well for Northampton for a few weeks after. I just got to thinking, no, he's playing too well. He has to be going now. And, obviously, Gatland knows how to get the best out of him as well. So I think that's a big factor. And he's, as you were saying, quite rightly, he's rounded his game a lot more in the last year. He looks a lot more comfortable taking the ball to the line more than he did in the past. And, he's reading the game a heck of a lot better overall as well. So, yeah, he definitely deserves to be going.
Absolutely. I think for me, he was one of the, like myself and Brandon, we did a thing where we did probables and possibles. And he was always a probable, even though we talked about he might have been the unlucky one. I think for me, I thought the Finn Russell, Johnny Sexton was going to be the interesting one. I'll be honest, I'm surprised Gatland didn't go with George Ford. I am surprised that George Ford didn't make our squad. I think George Ford is just such a clever rugby player. He's such a clever rugby player. And perhaps it's played against him the fact that, England they can't decide, but they often go between Farrell playing 10 and playing when they had Slade and his name will come to me now, the Worcester centre. Ollie Lawrence, started him. That lasted all of one game and then that didn't happen again. And then Farrell moves back up to 12 and George Ford's back in. I think he is underestimated on how good a rugby player he is. He would have been my third choice ultimately. But I think Farrell's going more as a 12 or a 13 option, especially if they're going to play someone like Bundyaki through the middle. Let's not rule out though, and you've done a video on it. I think Chris Harris, he's defensively, he's a very, very viable option for that test side because he offers that solidity in the midfield. And he's also had that experience where he has played wider out. He's played games on the wing. I've seen him play on the wing for Gloucester. and he never looks out of place on the wing. So, you know, let's not forget, he's no slouch. So he could quite comfortably play 13 and, you know, Bundyaki punches a hole and he comes shortly after, you know. But I think it's all dependent on the Gatland game plan.
Yeah,
you know,
I think Henshaw. Sorry, but I think Henshaw is going to be one of the definite test starters. I mean, yeah. So I mean, but I get what you mean. But I mean, just with how Henshaw's been playing and the variety he has offer, I just can't see if he's fit. Of course, I can't see Gatland not picking him as one of the centers. The other one I still think is, at the moment, it's looking like it's more likely to be Bundyaki. I'm just gauging that by the way Gatland's been talking about them as a pair, Aki and Henshaw. But I still think, like, obviously a lot of form comes into that as to how well they do pre the tests. But I think, as I said, Henshaw's definitely nailed on as one of the test centers, whether it's 12 or 13 yet, I don't know. But
yeah, absolutely. I think Henshaw was another one that's been on people's sheets since day one. And I think he looks really good at the minute as well. Even though
he looks brilliant.
Even though they lost against La Rochelle, I thought he was extremely good, not just in his attacking play, but his defence as well.
Yeah.
He is a stalwart in that centre position, and he's probably. But it's interesting you say. I don't know whether he's got the 12 or 13 jersey. I don't know how this is going to be playing out. But yeah, does he go with Farrell at 12 and then Henshaw at 13? So you've got the extra kicking option. But then it doesn't make sense why he selected Aki then, unless you're bringing him off the bench. But I don't see why you do that. It's so many questions at the minute. You just want them to almost get on the playing field now and see in that first game what sort of patterns they play and how they approach it. It's got to come sooner or later, and I just can't wait now.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably a couple of areas we haven't really touched on yet: the scrum halves and the back three, obviously wingers and fullbacks. Regards to the scrum halves, do you think the competition was fairly average, poorish, good? What do you think of the scrum halves going?
I think the scrum half debate was probably the biggest one in terms of there was no real standouts. I think everybody was saying, oh, well, Conor Murray's going to get in there. Well, rightly so. This would have been his third Lions tour. He's been there before. He knows what he's doing. So even if he wasn't there going as a test starter, he was always going to make the squad as like an experienced head. Ali Price, I thought it could happen. I think when he's on the money, especially the way him and Finn Russell play together, when he's on the money, he's a really exciting scrum half. Gareth Davies was the one for me. It was a flip of a coin for me between him and Thomas Williams from the Cardiff Blues. Again, Gareth Davies, he's got that ability that, he can sniff an intercept from about 20 metres away. He's a nuggety scrum half. He'll get in there, he'll get in the faces of those South African forwards, and he'll really get under their skin. But I just think the competition level, because there's so many good nines that are not playing international rugby at the moment, John Cooney, Danny Kerr, just to name two, it was always going to be an interesting call, whoever was selected as scrum half, especially after Ben Young said that he wasn't going to be available.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I think Gareth Davies is still, my personal opinion, his pass for an international number 9 is average at best. Still, I think. His box kicking so. Same with Ali Price in the box kick in front. I think his box kicking needs to be more consistent. And with Conor Murray, I think it was inevitable. He was always going to go. And the thing is, he does look like he's coming good again during the Six Nations, because I think the past couple of years since he came back from that injury he had at the end of 2018, he just hasn't looked the same player. And it's only like recently starting to come back, looking close to that player again. So it was inevitable. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, Danny Kerr, I mean, John Cooney, I would have had John Cooney as one of my 9s just because of how well he's been playing for the last year and a bit. And I've still not got an answer as to what Farrell's gripe is with him when it comes to Ireland.
I still get it.
And
I think Cooney was a really strange one because you almost want to pick him because he's been so good this year. But at the same time, you almost felt, well, if he's not been selected internationally, and obviously Gatland and Andy Farrell have got a decent relationship. They've worked together on 2 Lions tours now. They know each other quite well, and no doubt there would have been conversations between the two of them. And maybe Andy Farrell pointed out some points why he's not selected him for Ireland. Who knows? But I think first things first, we got to get him playing international rugby. I think he's one player that you just can't. It's like a Sam Simmons. You can't ignore this player forever.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're having struggles in that position, you can't ignore it for as long as they have. Mm-hmm. So yeah, my nines. I had John Cooney as the third covering 9.
Yeah, I was the same. I had him in my initial squad as going. I again, just because of the lack of international games he's played recently, I didn't think Gatland would pick him. But I mean, just again, and also the fact that he also offers a good kicking option as well, because he kicks the goals for Ulster. So it's I mean, again, I don't understand. I still don't get like what Andy Farrell's gripe seems to be with him, that he's just persistent not picking him. I mean, it might be a case of like with Eddie Jones with Sam Simmons. I honestly think Eddie Jones with Sam Simmons, it's just an ego thing. Like everyone's telling him, oh, pick him. And then there's that side of him that just wants to be like, no, I'm the coach. I'm the right here. I will pick who I, sort of want. I'm not listening to any of yous. That, I mean, there's a part of me that thinks Andy Farrell might be thinking that, but I don't know. I mean, because he has selected other players you think wouldn't have ordinarily been picked if he was going for more conservative choices, but he's done it. So, again, it's who knows?
Who knows? It's interesting, like the Reece Webb thing with Warren Gatland a few years back. He just didn't understand why Gatland wouldn't pick him. I know you had the
wasn't it because he went to Toulon or?
Yeah, but he was one of those players where they brought there was Gatland's law. Gatland's law came in, but then obviously they brought it in the year that, he'd signed for Toulon and then they announced it afterwards. And he said that he would have never made that sign-in at the time unless he'd have had the assurances from the coaching setup that he would have still been allowed to play for Wales. And I think that was the big thing. And then obviously when it did come that they were allowed to pick a certain amount of overseas players, and he just wasn't touching Webb. And it's another one of those things, yeah, you can tell him as many times as you want, but at the end of the day, he's being paid the big bucks. Like what you're saying with Eddie, then he's like, well, at the end of the day, my pockets are being filled by the RFU, and if I want to pick him, I'll pick him. If I don't, so be it. Like
right. A bit of a difference, though, is with regards to results. Eddie's not proven anyone wrong this recent Six Nations by his persistence to pick a frankly unfit Billy Vunipola, and so I think like the criticism's been mostly fair, not the personal stuff, obviously, but just regards to folk giving them a bit of flat for not picking informed players. And I think England got what they deserved the recent Six Nations. But that's recent sidetrack. Last thing we'll probably touch on is the back three choices. They were all the ones I picked, I predicted to go. Are you happy with them? Is anyone you would have thought maybe an outside chance would have got in, or anyone you would have picked differently?
I think it's interesting. If you look throughout the squad, he's gone versatility all the way. But if you look at the back three in particular, I think outside of Liam Williams, he's gone for specialist players. Like, Louis Rees-Zammit is a winger. Even though he's played some rugby at fullback for Gloucester, he's a specialist winger. Josh Adams, winger. I was quite surprised that he went for it. I'm glad Anthony Watson made it, because for me, I absolutely love watching him play rugby. He's such an unpredictable player. I'm glad to see him in there.
Yeah.
Again, with the Scottish shirt on, I think if Stuart Hogg hadn't have made the Lions tour, then I would have given up on rugby and started watching table tennis or something, because he was one man that just had to go on this Lions tour. And if anybody takes that 15 jersey off him, I want to know why, because they'd have had to have done something spectacular to take that jersey off him. He's transformed. I know obviously you would probably be a massive fan of him as well, but
yeah,
for me, since he went to Exeter, his game has grown, but not only in terms of his on the field playing abilities, his demeanor as a captain, as a leader, as a player that inspires others around him. I think he's just become like the ultimate. I was genuinely thinking at one point that Gatland could potentially name him as captain. I was thinking, because you usually see that your tour captain, you almost want to guarantee that test position. And I was umming and ahhing at one point whether he would go with Alan Wynne, because I was like, there's so much competition in the second row. Will he definitely go with Alan Wynne for that first test? And we've seen in previous years, Warburton named as tour captain, doesn't make the test side. But I thought, do you know what? I think Hogg is one of those you can say, unless he gets injured, I think he starts in all 3 tests.
Possibly. The thing is, though, like folk outside of Scotland love to focus on the negative with him, and the fact the game he had against Ireland, where under the high ball he was a bit shaky at times in that game. There's folk focusing a lot on that, but I also think looking at Liam Williams against England, where he missed 2 tackles, which led to both of England's tries. So again, like, you know, I just think folk focus on too much negative one way and not the other. But that's that's just what I think there. But no, I think Hoggy's class. He's one of those players as well. Like, if he gets the ball, you think, oh, something's going to happen. And what we were talking about earlier with Finn Russell, every time Hogg gets the ball and he's in a bit of space, he will keep the South Africans on their toes. They will be like, we have got to, you know, nail this guy straight away, because if he gets like 5-10 meters where he gets a bit of a run, something's going to happen, whether he, like, you know, sort of makes a bit of a break, or whether he gets support inside and gets them over the gain line to set up an attack, or, you know, just something like, if he gets the ball, like, you think, you know, something exciting could happen. And under the high ball, again, I think Jeremy Guscott said this in a recent podcast. He said, oh, if he doesn't drop a couple of balls in the warm-up games, he'll definitely start. And I was just thinking, you know, okay, maybe drops one ball, but what if Liam Williams plays fullback and misses a tackle, or he drops a ball? Like, you know, it's a bit of a, you know, a thing there. And then you have blooming Adam Jones coming out and not picking a Scot in his test side. And I'm just thinking, what's up with you there, mate? Why do you hate us so much? But I think just, again, his all-round ability, and he's grown as a captain for Scotland, as you're saying. I think at the start of it, I think he still had a bit of a maturity about him a bit. And obviously the drop ball over the line against Ireland in that first game he captained them, the mistake against England, which led to England's try. But after that, he's just proven what a class player he is, and how he's learnt from those mistakes, and, you know, just how he's like prepared to, you know, sort of make up for when he does make a mistake, which is getting rarer and rarer. But when it does happen, he's always, like, for example, when Exeter played Wasps recently, he dawdled a bit with a kick, which led to Wasps scoring their only try. But the second half, he just came out and he absolutely ran the show. And I think he got man of the match that game. And just, you know, that's just the sort of player he is. And I think someone you definitely need in your Test 15.
I can't see him not featuring in the Test 15. I think in the first 3 games, I think you'll see Hogg start one at 15. I think you'll see Liam Williams start one at 15. And I think you'll see Watson start one at 15.
Yeah, I agree.
Solely for the purpose that he'll want to see the abilities under the high ball for definite. But obviously, who's going to play the best tactical game from 15? Mm-hmm. And I think whoever the best 2 are, one of them will start at fullback and the other will play on the wing. Mm. For me, the only way that works is if Hogg starts 15. I think Watson and Liam Williams are both capable of playing really good games if they're still in that side, but on the wing. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, Brandon will kill me for saying it, because he'll want Louis Rees in. I want to see Duhan van der Merwe rip it up against the box, mate. I think he's an absolute talent. What a big bloke. But the thing I like about a winger is a winger that comes in looking for work. Mm-hmm. And especially because of his size, he's going to come looking for work all day long. And I just think he is going to be one of those players that, you know, you give him a chance in one of the warm-up games and, you know, against maybe, I don't know, one of the lesser Springbok provinces, then, you know, it wouldn't surprise me. He goes out, scores a hat-trick, and then goes, right, don't pick me in a test side now, then Gatland today. You.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, with Duhan is still... his defense can be a little bit suspect. I mean, he can tackle, but his positional play at times still needs work, especially if he's up against Cheslin Colby. He's got to be on the money there. Otherwise, Cheslin will run rings around him. Even if he is on the money, like, obviously we know Cheslin Colby's a very, very capable of running rings around anyone. I mean, the thing is, like you mentioned, wingers looking for work. I think that's the good thing about all the 4 wingers that have been picked, is they all are workaholics as well as having very good ability. I think Squidge Rugby touched on this very well. Like, they're all wingers who are prepared to, you know, make a hit at a ruck, or they're all prepared to come in off their wings to look for looks for extra work, or like, they can spot a gap maybe other, players haven't spotted as much, and they like make the line to exploit it. And that's where I think that's why all fours wingers are there, definitely.
Yeah, I think, like you said, wingers was a strange one considering how versatile everyone else has gone. The interesting one to come into all this, where Elliot Daly fits in, because I think you've got plenty of 15 options, you've got plenty of winger options, unless he's going to centre cover, which report I read this week was Elliot Daly was the 37th man. And he was just a direct replacement for George North. So that was what I heard, because obviously George North nowadays is being considered as a centre, but obviously he's got that ability to play on the wing. And yeah, from my understanding, that Elliot Daly was the 37th man, and it was a very heated discussion between the Lions coaches, which resulted in them saying, right, we just pick 37 men then, and he goes.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I would have thought that maybe Courtney Laws was the 37th man, but I mean, I don't know. But no, I think is mainly because of his versatility he's there. I don't think he's there as the replacement for George North, because he's a completely different kind of player to North. So
obviously North not being selected, he obviously had to replace him with someone, and there's nobody who can really say is George North, and I'm gutted for George, because I think this would have been a superb tour for him, considering the form he's found since he's moved to the centre.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I would have. I still have question marks over his defence, with regards to him getting George North. That is, with getting the balance of knowing when to shoot up or when to drift a bit, and that's something I still think he's got to work on his game. But regards to his overall play and his attacking game from 13, absolutely, he's been brilliant recently. And sadly, obviously very sad, he picked up the injury that he did. So yeah, I mean, as to whether, as we said, I don't think it's Elliot Daly as his direct replacement, but I mean, versatility wise, is played in his favour. And if Gatland, because I know it's another credit in the bank thing as well, because if Gatland can get him back up to the level he knows he can play when he's at his best, he's got, I think, every chance of, like with anyone, every chance of making the Test 23. But
yeah, definitely, I could agree with you, mate.
So yeah, I've got covered quite a lot. Have you got anything else you want to add in before we wrap up, Ben?
No, mate. I think it's been a great rugby chat. I think we've tackled everything from Lions all the way down to grassroots for this. So yeah, great chat, mate. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And thank you very much for coming on. As I said at the start, obviously the link to Ruck and Roll Rugby will be in the descriptor. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed what we had to say. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you later on.